Hello, Malvika. Welcome to Loving Its Cancer and ZenOnco.io. I'm Justina from ZenOnco.io. This is a cancer healing journey talk where we invite speakers who have gone through cancer, maybe as patient, caregiver, or survivors. These CAGs are very close to our heart because many patients tell us that when they listen to others' journey, it inspires them.
Got
It
it.
helps them to boost their confidence and gives them hope that if others can beat this disease successfully, why can't they? So, thank you so much for joining today's CHA talk.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So, could you please introduce yourself and tell us how it all began?
Sure. I'm Malvika and I'm based out of Bangalore now. And my journey really began when I was, my exposure to cancer actually happened when I was 10 or 11 years old when my grandfather suffered from a soft tissue sarcoma. But I saw that there was a lot of caretaker involvement, a lot of medication, chemo, radiations. He went through all of that, but it took a toll on the entire family. It wasn't just him, but it was everybody around us who were suffering in their own ways. Fast forward about 20 years, and my father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It was an adenocarcinoma. And we figured it out only in the very last stages because my father showed absolutely no symptoms except for this niggling cough, which we sort of dismissed as an extension of his asthma condition. But turns out that was the only symptom he had. But by the time we took him to a pulmonologist and got him checked out, it was unfortunately too late. And knowing the nature of the disease itself, the doctors made it very clear that there was really no permanent cure to this, but we would work on figuring out the best sort of care that we could give him. And that was in mid 2018, around September of 2018. And unfortunately, my dad lost his battle in February of 2019. So it took those 4 or 5 months was intense for us because we were trying to figure out the various types of medicines that could be done, what was the sort of gene therapy, if there was any. Um, when the diagnosis happened, especially when I was young, it was my grandpa. I wasn't really that close to the medication part of it. But when it came to my father, I went into this sort of hero complex where I said, I'm going to find the solution for this. I'm going to make sure my father gets the medicines he needs and the right treatment, and everything's going to be okay. We went through stages, of course, when we heard the diagnosis. The first reaction was shock, and then it was denial. I found every other disease that could have matched his symptom except for pancreatic cancer, because he showed no pain. He was so fortunate that he not a day of pain was suffered by him. But then I emailed people sitting in Japan and Taiwan because I knew they had put these articles out for adenocarcinoma in the pancreas. Um, emailed the Nobel laureates of that year for medicine because they had figured out the protein sequence to break down the adenocarcinomas. Tried all that. And, the medical fraternity came together. The folks in Japan and Taiwan actually replied to my emails and they said, nope, the diagnosis is actually right. You're on the right medical treatment. We wouldn't have done anything otherwise. The folks in the US also replied and they said, yeah, looks about right. Unfortunately, this particular type we haven't cracked. And my father was a physicist and he worked on, the research equivalent of MRIs. So he was looking at his scans. He knew exactly what was going on. So my father and I used to have very open conversations about these things. So that was my journey. And, it went through shock to denial. And then it was, okay, let's go figure this out and solve it. But other things happened along the way, and infections and pneumonia and all of that kicked in. And my father finally, his heart kind of gave up. There was only so much it could pump out, considering all the different ailments that he picked up during the course of his treatment. I think you're on mute.
Yeah. So, as you said that so much went through. So, when your grandfather had cancer, but you were very young, but when your father got diagnosed, it was very late. But it was kind of shocking because, as you mentioned, that there were no much symptoms. So, what was your reaction and your family's reaction because of the recurrence of this, cancer history again?
Yeah. So I was, until 2018, my family, my husband, my children, we were all in California in the US. But April of 2018, we relocated. My kids, we brought them here. They were taken care of by grandpa and grandma, Ajitata here, and they were totally sorted. My father was fit and fine. He was taking care of the kids 24/7. My mother used to work as a teacher. So my father had just retired in February of that year. So April, he was looking forward to the kids coming, and it was wonderful. Everything was great. So when I finally packed up and moved in July and I'm sorry, August, something was off because that cough that I had heard, earlier in April when I dropped the kids off still remained. He was dismissing it as Bangalore pollution and the cold and the incessant rains, and every single excuse was out there. Convincing, because we used to go to our physician constantly, and the physician, I think it was because he had seen my father's gradual decline. It never came out as a startling, fact. He too said the same things. This is just the cold and the rain and the weather and the pollution and such. So when the diagnosis actually happened, I don't know. This was something I figured out about myself. Um, I quickly went into my shock to denial lasted about 5 or 6 hours. From the shock, then it was no, absolutely not. The docs have got it wrong. You can't have pancreatic cancer. It could be pancreatic TB, even, or one of those things. So the denial lasted about 3 or 4 days. And once I sort of calmed down and looked at the reports again, and I spoke to my father, I said, all right, let's get down to business then. So my reactions really were not emotional. A lot of people were surprised seeing this, but I figured that my mother and my father's mother, my grandma was still around. They were extremely emotional. They're like, how could this happen to us again? Um, my father was extremely healthy. He used to play tennis even in his 60s, and walked everywhere, very particular about his diet. Everything that the doc ordered, he did it. But he still got this, right? And the dreaded one, which really had no cure. So a lot of emotions went through our family. It was my mother was sort of grief stricken because she thought this was the only time she was looking forward to his retirement where they could spend together, because they were very busy early on. And my grandma was like, she never wanted to lose a child of her own. So it was extremely emotional, but I think they needed one anchor in the family, which turned out to be me, where it was not about emotions, but it was about, let's go. What do we do next? How do we keep on? How do we keep this going? It I sort of shut down that side of my brain, which was the emotional part, and it got down into the brass tacks. How do we take care of you? What are the next steps? Which doctors do we go to? What kind of treatment? And my dad also liked that. He liked to have somebody being very pragmatic and stoic about it rather than getting caught in that whirlwind of emotions. So the reactions were different, but I think it took the family, my mother and especially, I think it took her about a month to come to terms with it. My grandma took a little longer as expected, but she also sort of banged on with him and said, come on, let's fight this. So finally, by I think in the end of about 2 months after the diagnosis, the whole family had come together, and we were a family on a mission, which was to get him cured.
So that's great that you didn't give up. It took time, as you mentioned, that it was very shocking, but you still, as a team, you worked together for him, and he knows it better, I bet on that. So, could you specify that what all treatment which he underwent during that
Sure,
time?
sure. So the the hospital we went to was HCG in Bangalore. Really nice hospital. We loved the team of doctors there. Dr. Ajay Kumar, who was the founder, was also my dad's classmate in college. So it was wonderful to have that sort of support system for us. But we were looking at treatments that did not involve any radiation. It was purely chemotherapy. So my dad's cancer started in the pancreas, but it had metastasized to his lungs and the liver. So we took a biopsy of his lung and sent it to Mumbai as well, just to see what sort of, if there was any gene therapy involved that he could be administered. Unfortunately, there was no match. But in the meantime, we had started him on a chemo journey, which involved tackling both the pancreatic and the lung cells. So it was on a sort of a dual mode chemo treatment that he had. I forget the names of the drugs, but they were largely administered through the IV, and it used to last about a day when he used to get the treatment, and he was on a weekly chemo cycle. And the idea was to have first 3 or 4 weeks of chemo done, get him through another PET scan and see how the cells were reacting to the chemo, and then keep changing it. So he had just the IV. There was never any radiation involved, because where the tumor was, there was no access to, the radiation couldn't have helped. It was inoperable as well, because it was completely intertwined in the pancreas. So they couldn't operate it out of him either.
Okay, so did you look for any other alternative treatment as such?
We did. In fact, the gene therapy was one. I also reached out to my doctor friends in the US to see if there were any clinical trials, because India didn't have any clinical trials for this particular type of cancer. Unfortunately, even in the US, we hit a roadblock. There weren't any. Locally also there were people who said, take the drug, a powdered form, like a kashaya of this plant called simaruba. And they said, take the simaruba, it might help him. We'd heard a lot of people who had like stage 1, stage 2 onset of the diseases, where that particular herb seemed to have helped them. People were talking about, there were some ladies I met with breast cancer stage 1 and 2 who had taken the simaruba only, and it had really helped remove the tumor to a large extent. There were some who said that their chemo side effects were vastly reduced because of that drug. So my father was on it, and I think maybe it did help, that particular drug, because he had no side effects from the chemo in terms of nausea or tiredness or loss of appetite. He had none of that. He lost his hair, of course, but there was really nothing else that sort of debilitated him from doing his daily work. So I personally feel that it was probably Simaruba that helped, because the doctors were astonished. Again, he used to keep shocking them every week when he would walk through the door and get his chemo. And I think it was largely this drug that helped, because it kept the nausea at bay. He wasn't tired, and that sort of helped, I think. But these were the only two things that we tried with my father.
Okay, so good to know that till the end of this battle, he was like fine, and he didn't face much of issues or pain as such
Yeah,
compared to
I
you.
think that the thing was, it was in December of 18, November end, he caught an infection. Like, he said he had a sore throat, and immediately it had warning bells in my head, because I just rushed him to the doc. I didn't want him to catch an infection at all. And when we went there, the doctor said, let's just keep him in the hospital for observation, because we never know when it would just escalate, because he was on this cocktail of drugs. So while we were there, luckily we were in the hospital when we took him in. And the second day, that throat itch had turned into a high grade fever. By day 4, he actually had to undergo a transfusion. But he came back home after that. Day 5, we were back home. But the 6th day after his infection, he had got pneumonia. So we were back in the hospital, and he spent close to 26 days in the ICU. It was traumatic for him, because he was fully conscious. He just wasn't able to breathe, because the cancer had taken away a large portion of his lungs, and pneumonia wasn't helping either. But he was fully conscious at the time, on ventilators. So it took us 27 days, in fact, for him to come out of the ICU, in which time I had set up the house as an ICU itself, with all the equipment and the gadgets, because I didn't want him to spend more time in the hospital what if he got more infections at the hospital? So we did come back home, and he was at home. Um, he was absolutely bedridden at that time because the pneumonia had sort of taken away all the energy in him. He'd had a tracheostomy done as well, um, thanks to Dr. Ajay Kumar, because my father and I had a conversation where I'd asked, because he was conscious, I had to seek his permission if he was okay to have the tracheostomy done. And my father just absolutely refused. He said, nope, I'm not getting any of this. Just take me out of here. And I said, if you don't get the tracheostomy, you're going to be gone in 2 days, Dad. So those were the kind of conversations I used to have with him. And he said, nope, I understand. In 2 days, this is going to happen. But luckily, the doctors were able to convince him to get it done. But so when he came back home, he was only getting fed through the tube and he wasn't able to breathe. So it was the tracheostomy, the tubes there that help push the air directly into his lungs. But he came out of it in like a month's time. The tubes were out. He was able to take nasal feeds. He was walking with the help of a walker in the room and into the living room and such. But I think that was far too much for his heart. It just gave up. After that, I knew that one more hospital visit. We'd restarted his chemos also, but by that time, I knew it was only a matter of time because the heart is a muscle; it can't keep working overtime.
Yeah, true on that. So, as you said that you were not much, in the process of as a caretaker for your grandparent, but for father, you closely observed him and you were part of the main caregiver.
Yeah.
So, as you said that you were very strong enough to like throughout the cancer treatment, but uh, so to remain like that, how did you manage your emotional and mental well-being during the treatment?
I it might sound weird considering my profession, but I took solace with my pets. Um, you know, working on them. So I used to play with them, walk them, sometimes even have a conversation with my dogs. It helped because they were the therapists I needed. HCG was wonderful that they had a therapist on site that my mother relied heavily on. She was talking to them, and that team was great for her. But I found my therapist in my dogs, and so that was something I did. My grandma went down the spiritual path, right? And she was all about life and such things. And I was very fortunate that my husband, he basically said, "You go focus on dad. I'll take care of the kids." So I had that support as well, and that was just a really important part of our lives. Where everybody knew what helped us. Um, we figured it out ourselves. So, like my mother, a lot of people I've noticed in India sort of dismiss this therapist at presence. But we were fortunate that the team pushed us. They said, no, go talk to it, especially at that tracheostomy time when we didn't know should we get the procedure done or not. The rest of the family, my uncle, my dad's younger brother, was there every single day supporting us. But there comes a time when the family has to make a decision to do or not to do a certain procedure, and having a therapist around really helped my mom. Although everyone's dismissive of it, I would say if they have access to a therapist, please take use of those resources, because that is an unbiased person who will be listening to you, who will be your sounding board, right? So that was basically how I kept my mental strength, how my mother sort of came through it, and my grandma as well. So I think as a family, we'd figured out whom would we reach out to when we needed to have that sort of support. I'm not saying I never cried or I never had a breakdown. I absolutely did, but that happened in the first week of treatment. After that, I was a woman on a mission. I must say that after my father passed, though, the walls came crumbling down. Right, it took me a really long time to get back and sort of think in a very positive manner. But while he was there, I really had no option but to focus on his care. I focused on myself. I'm not saying I didn't, but that came through my pets, where my time with my dog was sanctum. It was the most sacred thing. No, and everybody knew around me knew better than to disturb me while I was with my dog. So he and I were a team, and I relied a lot on him.
That's really good. So, during that time, your father went through a lot. Your cancer, his cancer treatment was way too long. He went through the pipe feeding and all that. So, how did you, as a caregiver, help him emotionally to go through the treatment?
Oh, um, the one thing I keep telling people, especially I have, others in my friends and family circle who are going through similar things. The one thing that I keep telling them is say everything you want to say to the patient, because you don't want to have regrets in your life later on that I wish I could have said something. I am so proud to say that I said everything to my dad. Everything that I have wanted to tell him, I said it. And in that period where he was really low emotionally, hearing this from me, where I was thanking him for letting me as a 10-year-old travel for state level, national level competitions, for thanking him for letting me choose very unconventional paths in my life, for trusting me to take some decisions in my life. I had to say that to him. And hearing this from his family, my mom, my grandma, everybody, his friends showed up, and my extended family was all there, and we were all talking to him about how wonderful it was. Nobody was talking about death. Okay, it was a celebration for us at that point in time. um, it was so important for us to keep telling him that he was loved, that he was so precious to us, that he was just life without him was meaningless. Nobody spoke about death, and I don't know why. And now I think back about it, we never spoke about what happens once you are gone, sort of thing. But it was about, you remember the time when this happened, you remember this, what was in your head where you said yes to this. I used to joke with him and ask him that being a parent now, I probably wouldn't have taken those decisions, but he did. And we used to have those, it's a very fun banter with my father. My relationship with him was more fun than anything else. And that was something that helped him, because I used to have a conversation with him, yes, about his treatment, about, the nurses around him, all of that. But then most of the time was spent around, hey, dad, you know what silly thing your grandson did today, and what your granddaughter did today, and what she said. So we tried to keep him grounded in, that he was surrounded by a lot of love, a lot of encouragement and positivity more than anything.
That's really good. So, what would be your top three learnings from this journey
You
as a
know,
caregiver?
the thing is, don't be afraid. As a caregiver, especially, I tell everybody, people focus only on the patient, very few focus on the caregivers. Um, and I can't, the amount of stress and physical pain caregivers go through is indescribable. And they need, you need to find that support system. It is absolutely essential for them to not be afraid to go and seek out help. You need to do that. That's the first thing for a caregiver, especially. The second thing is, it is fine for you to grieve, but I learned that grieving in front of the patient didn't help either person. I learned that it is a natural thing where you're scared of what next, right? But use this time of grieving, but don't make that the center and focus of your life. Don't, it's easy for us to go down the path of why me, right? But that can be thought of later when you have the time, but focus on, you know keeping the patient surrounded by positivity, and for the caregiver to feel confident that they're doing everything they can to to their maximum extent, financially, physically, emotionally, whatever. Don't overdo it. That was the second thing. The third, thing I would say is, don't be afraid to seek second, third, fourth, fifth opinions. Because I did that early on in my journey, where I spoke to the doctors in Japan and Taiwan and the US. And when everybody comes around with the resounding yes, that this is exactly what needed to be done, I was more confident in taking forward riskier treatment plans, going forward with more riskier chemos, because I knew that the second, third, fourth, fifth opinion were all saying the same thing, and that I was doing the best I could. We were all doing the best we could for my father. So it is important to go get that second, third, fourth, fifth opinions, because some things you never know. Some doctors miss and some others don't. But those were the top three things that I would say I learned.
Okay. So, what would be your message as a caregiver to the other cancer patients, survivors, or caregivers who will be listening to you?
I mean, I'd say if you're still in this battle, you will come out a winner. If not physically, at least spiritually, you're going to come out a winner. I think I would say, please use this time that you have to say everything you want to say. You don't want to live a life of regrets. If the patient is capable of traveling or meeting, go do that. Ask, have those honest conversations about what they want to do with their lives, and let them go forth and do it. The doctors will have a lot of things to say, but see what's more important to you personally in your lives. If there's something you really want to do, go ahead and do it, because you don't want to live a life of regrets. As a caregiver, I can say there are physical limits to how much care you can give a person. If you think that you cannot give any more care, stop. Don't feel guilty that you have to do more and more and more and more. You don't want to turn into a patient yourself. One of you has to stay strong. So do the best that you can, but don't look around and measure yourself with somebody in the next ward or someone in the next room is doing. You can't. Everybody's life is different, but that those few months of treatment, that care, live life with no regrets. Have those conversations, go travel, have those meals you always wanted to eat. Do something that will make you have very precious memories to cherish. That's really essential.
That's great. Staying strong and living the moment which you already have, rather
Yeah.
than thinking of the future and then,
No
you
more
know,
what ifs. You can't. That period shouldn't turn into a what if period. Whatever you wanted to do, do it. It was, God's blessings or destiny, I don't know, which brought me back to India at that right time. But physically being separated from my father, if I had to do this sitting in California and he was struggling here in India, I think I would have had a nervous breakdown. So, especially for caregivers who are far away from the patients, I would say make an effort to come spend time with the patient. Um, you may not realize it, but your physical presence is going to be so calming and so supportive to the patient themselves. So try as much as you can to be physically there. um, I think you just have to cross the seven seas if you must, because it's essential for you to do that. No regrets. That's what it has to be.
it's so good to see that you're very strong and you have seized the days and moments
I
with
didn't
your
have an
dad.
option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all you have right now is the the moments that you cherish and you still remember the fun times that you had with your dad.
Absolutely. And not a single thing that I have said unsaid. My father's heard it all. He's heard my rants, he's heard my praises, he's heard my jokes, he's heard it all. So I don't have a single thing to say that I wish I had done something with my father or said something. So
So on that note, as you remember the journey of cancer, your dad's, more the probability of stress and pain would be less, I would say, but the cherishment moment which we cherished and fun were more. So just to sum up this beautiful and memorable journey with your dad in one sentence, what would it be?
I would say thank you, Dad, for showing me how strong I am, and for really seizing the moment. And I think I am here today, quitting my corporate job, doing something that I really like, because that experience taught me life is short. Go seize the moment.
Great. So thank you so much, Malvika, for
Thank
sharing
you.
sharing your very, a story or experience or memory which is very close to your heart and which you still cherish at the moment, and sharing your experience as a caregiver and guiding, what you observed uh, throughout your father's treatment and the cancer journey. So it means a lot, and I'm really sure that it's really going to help all the
I hope.
caregivers and
I hope
patients
so.
who will be listening to you. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much once again for being
Absolutely. And
part.
thank you, ZenOnco. You guys are on a wonderful mission. I only wish you more success.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care. All the best for your future endeavors.
You too. Thank
All
you.
right.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
Bye.